Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today, we're discussing a watch launched in 2019 that helped to answer the question of how Georges Kern, the new guard in Breitling management, would retain the old guard of Breitling fans from the Schneider era, people who loved the Hercules, the Super Avenger, the big and the bold, the Bentley of the 90s and the 2000s. Well, this is an olive branch to that classical Breitling enthusiast. In the era of retro reeditions and smaller watches, this Superocean 48 flies the flag for the original fan base. And it is 48 millimeters in diameter in DLC-coated stainless steel. It's 17.4 millimeters thick, and it's got a broad wingspan of 57.3 millimeters across the wrist with a 24 millimeter spacing between the lugs. This is one for the Schneider era Breitling fan, so if you love what they were doing with watches that stood out from Omega and Rolex by virtue of wrist presence, well, this continues in that vein. And on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, I'm going to say this watch is a little bit too large. I think you need a 17 centimeter circumference wrist or larger to wear this thing well. That said, it does sit securely. I could wear it functionally. I just think aesthetically you need a bigger wrist. That said, I don't think anyone can wear this thing underneath the cuff, both for its thickness and for the fact that there's an awful lot of outcropping hardware cantilevered over the 9 o'clock side of the watch. You can see from over the top, the lugs are definitely over the edge of my wrist. The strap is a lovely piece. You can see it has that Hershey bar look with a combination of debossed and embossed Breitling lettering. Thick cut, it's designed to last a long time, and yet the specific rubber used is very supple, almost like silicone. Matte blue, you can see there are hollows on the bottom to let the wrist breathe a little bit, and then we have a counterweighted, almost clevis style pin buckle here, and it's got one feature I happen to approve of. I do love these raised bridge buckles where the prongs themselves sit underneath the bridge, creating a little hollow where the strap can enter and then sit flush when it's on your wrist. A small detail, but an important one. Now, about DLC. In my experience, DLC wears well. There are cheap PVD applications that scratch easily. Here's the thing. PVD, or physical vapor deposition, is a process for coating. DLC, or diamond-like carbon, is the material deposited by the process. It is not always cheap to do a DLC, so there are a lot of cheap PVDs out there. DLC actually does a great job of resisting scratches, and you can see that this watch is almost entirely intact despite being pre-owned. Now we have a brushed blue ceramic insert atop the bezel to help resist scratches, and a blue rubber shoulder around the crown, which is a screw-down crown. This watch is 300 meters water resistant, and it's true 300 meters does not convert directly to 1,000 feet. That's an approximation. Press the I believe button here. The bezel has a wonderfully sharp micro knurling outboard. You really feel it. It grips, it bites, easy to adjust with wet, sweaty, or gloved hands. And it's actually a bi-directionally adjustable bezel. This is still an ISO 6425 compliant diver. That's the quote definition of a dive watch. As long as the timing reference can be locked and will not accidentally extend a dive, it meets the definition. So as soon as I reposition this little rubber pusher, then the bezel is locked into place. As soon as I displace it, now I can turn it in either direction. It is a 60-click bezel, but it has a nice tactile, chunky indexing action to it. Let's do a lume shot here. As you can see, this is a diver with no shortage of lume, and the bezel has been fully calibrated, a detail I like. Luminova has been inserted into the hollows of the bezel, and the entire first 15 minutes of your dive calibrated individually so you can read with precision. Also, another feature that every dive watch should have, which is a luminescent constant seconds hand. You should know when you're about to dive in the dark or actively diving in the depths that your watch is running, and the only way you know that is with a lumed seconds hand, so good on Breitling for using that feature there. Now, the dial is fascinating because it is surprisingly artful for a giant Breitling. It is a smoked fume gloss fade, so a fume fade or vignette lacquer that starts very light at the center and darkens at the edge with a mirror shine all the way across. We have large applique indices, an upscale touch that's not universal on Breitling divers. Sometimes they have used printed dials, not here. We have that same satin finish on the hands, and then we have a flange outboard that can be used for reading minutes as well as seconds, and it's a no-date dial, which means it's beautifully balanced. Part of the reason it's a no-date dial is because there's a soft iron cage that encompasses the movement, and by closing up all of the holes, that iron cage is able to deflect particularly electromagnetic flux around the hairspring and the escapement, endowing this watch with substantial anti-magnetic qualities. Now, the movement is what Breitling calls a caliber 17, which is an ETA 2824 architecture, or a Sellita SW200, which is the same thing, just made by Sellita. Remember, those older ETA movements are now open source because the patents and the licensing all expired. Anyone can make a 2824. Sellita makes one, ETA makes one. There are a couple of others out there. And universally, they feature automatic winding and stop seconds, which is one of the features you have here, so you can set this watch precisely against a reference time. It's a bidirectional winder, a 4 Hz beat rate. It has a 38-hour power reserve. One feature that is not universal on 2824s and SW200s is the COSC chronometer certification. Chronometer is the highest grade at which these movements are delivered. ETA has 4 standard grades, Sellita has its equivalents, and chronometer is the highest. So 5 position adjusted and the movement COSC chronometer certified. It's a 2-week timing standard that adjusts the watch and then tests it in 5 positions, several temperatures, and again for almost 2 weeks. And it cannot vary by more than -4 plus 6 seconds per 24 hours. There are a whole bunch of other criteria, but a COSC certified movement makes it through all of them. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.